Hello world, Patrick here. I wanted to give you some thoughts on progression and exercise. Progression and exercise. So many of you listening to this video probably exercise, and a good question to be asking yourself is how challenging should an exercise be? And a challenge could be various things. It could be your load, so your resistance. It could be the effort you're putting into it. It could be what you're thinking about. It could be how fast you're going. Those are some different ways you could be challenging yourself. It could also be the length of time. How long are you going? There's lots of different ways that you can progress and exercise. But how do you know what is a good challenge? How do you know what might be too easy? What might be too much? Well, to get things to change inside of you, you have to have a challenge. Now, as soon as I said that word, I'm sure many of you out there had a very clear picture of what you think of as a challenge. You might have had an image of someone in your head swimming laps really hard and they're puking into the gutters in the pool, which is really gross. You might have had an image of someone gritting their teeth together, maybe lifting weight and going, ah! So I'm sure you had some different images like that. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But how do you determine what is a good challenge? So I want to give you some things to think about that might determine what a good challenge is. One of the ways to determine whether something is a good challenge or not is the level of shaking you experience when you're working out. Here's what I mean by that. If you're experiencing a tremendous amount of shaking, which is like lack of control, it's probably too challenging. You probably shouldn't be experiencing any shaking or maybe minimal shaking. And really, I wish I'd have made this point first. Probably the number one way to tell if something is challenging or too challenging is control. If you're lacking in control, the load you're doing, the speed at which you're moving, the duration you're executing the exercise for, you should be able to control what you're doing. And simply what I mean by control is, are you aware of what should be moving and what should be holding still? So I use this example all the time, but the bicep curl. So think about a dumbbell bicep curl. What should be holding still in a dumbbell bicep curl? Well, maybe the first question you should ask me is, what's the person's goal? Let's assume it's to train the elbow flexors, these things called biceps. Of course, there's other things that flex your elbow as well, but we'll say biceps. Well, if you're moving from your hips and your back, then you're actually not achieving the goal because you're actually using other stuff to achieve the motion. So in that particular example, everything should be still in your body with the exception of your elbows bending and straightening. Your torso should be stiff. Your hips should be still. This length from shoulder to elbow should not be moving forward and backwards. And it's interesting, whenever I point those things out to people, they go, oh, yeah, I know that. And as soon as they start lifting, they go like this and their elbows come forward. I'm hesitant to say this, but I want to say 100% of the time. So in your exercise, are you keeping the things staying still that should be holding still? And are you keeping the things that should be moving? If you're deviating off of either of those things, you're not controlling what you're doing, so you probably have too great of a load. Another way to tell if you're doing something too challenging is if you have soreness afterwards. And again, I think many of you heard me say that. You went, what? I love getting a good soreness afterwards. Hear me out for a second. There is a spectrum of soreness, and I'm fairly certain people probably respond to weight training differently and maybe have different levels of soreness. The soreness I want you to think about is near debilitating soreness where it actually changes what you can do, how you move. Does it cause you to walk with a limp? Does it cause you not be able to walk up the stairs? That degree of soreness. And again, I'm assuming, assumptions are always dangerous, that when you're exercising, I'm not talking about challenges like races or competitions. I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about fitness. Fitness and sports, unrelated. Okay, and we can talk more about that later. But so what level or what degree of soreness do you have afterwards? If you're experiencing extreme soreness after you work out, whether it's immediately after, the next day, or the day after, that's probably a little too challenging, maybe a lot too challenging, depending on the degree and level of soreness. Here's another sign that what you're doing might be too challenging, is if you're getting injured, you're tearing muscles, you're getting stress fractures, you're damaging joints. And I know all of that sounds obvious, but it is not as obvious as you would think. I know lots and lots of people who get injured when they're working out, or when they're training for a race. They get plantar fasciitis, and they get shin splints, and they get stress fractures. None of those are good things. And if you're trying to get yourself as quickly as you can to a goal, when you get injured, that actually prevents you from getting to that goal quickly. You actually have to slow down to let the body recover. So again, we're talking about exercise challenge, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. And what's going to be the most appropriate for you is finding that load, that speed at which you're working, and that duration that you can control every single repetition. Maybe you're just holding a position, doing one rep. You're doing something like a plank. Can you keep that body how you want to keep it the entire set? That brings up a lot of other issues, such as you got to be aware of what is proper for each exercise for what you're trying to challenge. And that's a conversation for another day. So hopefully that's helpful to you to think through how to make something that should be appropriately challenging to your exercise. All right, everybody, hang in there. Make sure you subscribe. And if you like this video, make sure you click the like button. Take care.